Hey guys, Justice here with tomorrowsfilmmakers.com, the largest online film academy in the world, and today we're going to be talking about cinematic composition. Now, composition is a fancy term for what is in the frame and where is it located. And it might sound simple, but a certain frame can be much more appealing to a viewer than others, and also much more cinematic. Now, inside our full course, we have a 6-hour-long cinematography course taught by Chris Kimlin, who has been the director of photography on many different feature films, and he takes you in depth on everything you need to know about cinematography. Now, we have been selling our film course successfully for years with an $800 price tag, and we've had over 4,000 students join. But right now we are doing something we have never done before, and we are running an insane sale of only $97. Our entire lifetime membership to our award-winning $800 film course for only $97. And I'm not even joking. If you want to take advantage of this crazy deal, you can check out our website in the link below and head on over to tomorrowsfilmmakers.com to learn more. But in this training, I'm going to give you guys my 8 steps that I take to make sure that I have great composition. And the great thing is you can do this with any camera that you have, a DSLR, cell phone, or pretty much anything. You don't need to buy some expensive lights or a Ronin S or an expensive lens to get more cinematic images. All you have to do is watch this video and apply these steps to your filmmaking. Now, the first rule that all of you guys need to apply is the rule of thirds. Now, the rule of thirds is a very well-known technique in the filmmaking world that you might be familiar with, but you also might not be using it properly. In a nutshell, it is scientifically proven that our eyes are drawn to these 4 intersecting points of the frame. Not the direct center, but these 4 corners. So by placing our subject on those 4 corners, it looks very much appealing and much more cinematic to the audience. Watch any Hollywood movie and you will notice that the main subjects are almost always on one of these intersecting points. Now, the center of the frame is always reserved for subjects with authority. If your subject is teaching or has more authority, you can put them in the center of the frame. That's why all master classes and other teaching videos, including one like this, are always placed in the middle. It just automatically gives your subject more authority in whatever he's talking about and makes it look like this is the main subject and I need to be listening to this person. Now, if you have a subject looking into the camera but off to one side, it doesn't feel quite as compelling as if they're in the center of the frame. But if your subject is not doing that, always put them on the rule of thirds. For landscapes or horizons, place them on one of the 2 lines going across and you will have an appealing image. The great thing is pretty much all cameras have a rule of thirds overlay built in, so you can have the rule of thirds on the back of your camera to get great composition with whatever camera you have. Something as simple as placing your subject on the rule of thirds can completely change your image. Number 2 is balance. Inside your frame, you can have one side more heavy than the other, and the audience can actually feel it. Like in interviews, if you have your subject to one side and also a picture frame on the same side as your subject, your image is going to start to feel unbalanced and very heavy to one side. And even if the audience doesn't know what feels wrong, they just know that something feels off. You can either move that picture frame to the other side or just add something to balance out the image, like a lamp. This looks much more balanced and much more cinematic. And when it comes to composition, I try to have something on the other side of my frame to balance out my subject at all times. And it doesn't have to be something huge, and it also doesn't need to be horizontal. It can also be balanced vertically or diagonally, whether it's a building, a statue, even a flower, something in the frame to balance the image, or your shot will start to look really heavy to one side. You can obviously apply this to interviews and talking head videos, but you can also apply this to weddings, real estate, and all other types of videos. It really doesn't matter, just make sure that you have balance in your frame. Number 3 is depth. You can create depth in many different ways, but one way is to shoot with a lower aperture. Not only will it make your image have more depth by blurring out the background, but it will also make it more cinematic and can also remove any distractions from your audience. This shot looks great, but you had no idea that there was something distracting in the background because we removed the distraction by shooting in a lower aperture. By blurring out the background, we create depth and separate our subject from the background. Another simple way to create depth is to simply pull your subject away from the background. It might seem simple, but I've seen many filmmakers film interviews up against a wall, giving your image absolutely no depth and it doesn't look cinematic. If I have to film an interview in a small room, I will inconvenience myself in order to have depth in my image. I'll push myself and the cameras as far in a corner as possible to bring my subject as far away from the background as possible. You can also add something interesting in the foreground to create depth, and by placing something in the foreground, we're able to not only show movement much easier, but it creates depth in our image and allows us to kind of shoot through it. It doesn't have to be anything large like a person or an object. It could be something small like leaves or plants or coming around from behind something as more of a reveal. We have our subject, the foreground, and the background creating depth. Number 4 is leading lines. These are simply natural lines in your composition that lead your audience to your subject. They can be found in everyday objects like hallways, landscapes, bridges, and they simply draw in your audience's attention to your subject. Now, they use leading lines in Hollywood all the time to bring attention to something. In USA's Mr. Robot, in this building, our subject always knows where he needs to go, and we as an audience know where he needs to go by the leading lines throughout the scene. But when our main character gets lost, what happens to those leading lines? They are gone. The character doesn't know where to go, and we as an audience don't know where he needs to go because there are no leading lines leading our eyes to the subject or the direction he should go. Something as simple as lines in the frame can lead our eyes towards a subject or away from the subject. So look for leading lines in your image to draw the attention of the audience. Some are very obvious like staircases or a handrail, but some can be even more subtle, like the top of a picnic table. The tablecloth works great, but removing the tablecloth so we have those lines on the top pointing towards our subject really make a difference. Number 5 is symmetry. As humans, we love order and we love to see something symmetrical. It looks appealing to us and very cinematic. Now, symmetry is everywhere. Windows, stairs, escalators, it is everywhere. Symmetry also doesn't take much effort to get. Looking at a person one way might look fine, but you might be able to just move the camera slightly to frame the shot in a way that's more symmetrical. This shot not only looks very symmetrical because of the building, but even has leading lines straight to our subject. All of this was done by barely moving the camera. So look around and find symmetry. Frame your shot and compose it properly to get the most natural and most cinematic project you've ever made. Number 6 is a dominant subject. If I critique a student's video, one of the main problems I see most often is that there is no dominant subject. You want to use all of these steps we just talked about to draw your audience towards the subject. But if the audience doesn't even know what the subject is, then you've completely failed in what you were trying to do. And having a dominant subject doesn't mean that you can't do a wide-angle shot and have to be close up on their face. It just means that when an audience looks at an image, they need to know exactly where their eyes need to go. They need to know exactly what they're supposed to be looking at. First thing is to fill the frame. Way too often people have empty space that is unnecessary. Now, some people say, oh, it's artistic. No, it's not. It's distracting. You can be artsy and not distracting. Having this as your main subject, but this is in your frame, this is not artsy. This is sloppy. And most of the time, it's just a simple mistake, and they don't fully fill the frame. So please, fill the frame and get rid of all unnecessary dead space. Number 2 is when you fill the frame, fill it with things that aren't distracting. If we have lots of empty dead space, I would frame it so that you remove some of the dead space. But if you needed to actually fill that frame, if we add something really bright or with movement that's going to be distracting, our audience is going to be confused. We have a dominant subject by shooting at a lower aperture, using symmetry and leading lines to bring attention to our subject and removing all dead space in the frame. Number 7 is headroom or leading room. Have you ever heard the filmmaking phrase, hey, give them some breathing room? This is what they mean. first is headroom. This is the space from the top of the frame to the top of your subject's head. In an interview, you typically want to have your subject's eyes about 2/3 from the top of the frame, and this means that you want to have some room above their head. You don't want their head to be all the way at the top of the frame, and on the flip side, you don't want there to be tons of empty space above their head. Now, there isn't a hard and fast rule to this because all interviews are different, and I've had interviews with people with giant hair, and so you have to determine if you want to have all of the hair in the frame or cut off some of the hair, but it's best to keep their eyes on the top line in the rule of thirds. Now, leading room or looking room is the exact same thing, except it's with the direction your subject is looking. Whatever way they are looking, you want to give them looking room. And just like with headroom, having their eyes about 2/3 of the frame, you would want to give your subject about 2/3 of the frame to look into. The basic rule is you want more room in front of your subject than behind them. And this is why with a lot of interviews, whatever way your subject is facing, they will place their eyes on the corresponding intersecting point on the rule of thirds. This will give them the perfect headroom and leading room. And of course, this doesn't have to be with interviews. Any shot or conversation that takes place, you want to give them headroom and looking room. And you would also want to do this when your subject is moving. You want to anticipate the movement without just reacting to it. If a subject moves, you want to move with them with the same amount of looking room as if you weren't moving. You wouldn't want to react late and it look like the subject is almost pushing the frame or forcing the movement. Leading room and headroom should always be used unless number 8 is actually one of my favorites, and it is to break the rules. And I know we just talked about how important it is to keep some of these rules, and I'm not saying to break them for no reason, but it is very cinematic to break the rules for a specific purpose. Now, each of these rules communicates something. So to break the rules will also communicate something else. So if you break the rule, make sure it is communicating what you intended it to communicate. The King's Speech is a perfect example. It's about a man who is soon to become king, but he has a stutter. This person, who should be the most powerful person in the film, he should be in the center of the frame and dominate every scene he's about to be king, is so scared to death when he meets his speech therapist. And this is because he's embarrassed by what he has. They purposefully film him with a crazy amount of headroom to show just how small and insignificant he feels. Then whenever they have a conversation, they give him no looking room at all to, again, give us the feeling of awkwardness. When he finally gains the courage, they give him looking room and they give him headroom to show that everything is back to normal. This rule was broken purposefully. One of my favorite films when it comes to composition is The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Starting out, our main character is depressed and he's a loser, and at the beginning of the film, they almost frame him out of the shot, breaking the rule of thirds by placing him at the very bottom or at the very edge of the screen. But at the end of the film, our hero is placed in the center to show progression, is to show his character development, and the contrast of these two shots is crazy, and all of it communicates a message. So as you can see, composition isn't just one step or one simple thing you can do. It's a series of steps that bring the audience's attention to our main subject, because that is our goal, to show our audience exactly where we want them to look by having the most pleasing looking image and the most cinematic. But also, like we just showed you, sticking to the rules 100% can ruin creativity. And just like with all rules, they can be broken, but they must have a reason to be broken. If our subject was framed like this, but he had his life completely in order, it would feel distracting and unnecessary. So every single shot tells a story. Where you place your subject in the frame tells a story. Be purposeful with your composition, and by taking these 8 steps, you are guaranteed to boost the production value of your projects and achieve cinematic results. So I hope that this video has really helped you guys out. Again, if you'd like to learn every single aspect of filmmaking, be be sure to check out our website at tomorrowsfilmmakers.com. We have over 1,000 training videos and over 100 hours of content on every single filmmaking subject that you can imagine. And if you want to go into the production side with weddings, real estate, music videos, commercials, we teach all about that. If you want to go more into the narrative side with directing, storyboarding, acting, we teach all of those as well. And like I said at the beginning, we have successfully been selling this course with an $800 price tag for years, but for a limited time, we are offering it to you guys for only $97. And again, I'm not joking. Our award-winning $800 online film course is only $97. To learn more, click the link in the description below and learn all the skills that you need to succeed.